Before we get to Beth Goetz. We will have a transcript today, and we are in a large room, so if you could project your questions so the transcription service can pick those questions up, that'd be appreciative. Also, to help Beth kind of put names with faces before you ask your first question, if you can identify yourself and your outlet, that would help Beth kind of get to know you a little bit more. That'd be appreciative. And we'll get right to Beth. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you coming out today. I just wanted to maybe start with this. Over my short time here, I have been just incredibly impressed by our student athletes, our coaches, our staff. We've got an amazing fan base and such a generous group of donors. And I think the combination of their passion, their talents, and their characters, really, it's uncommon. And it's what makes being a Hawkeye so special. And I'm so glad that I have an opportunity to be part of that here. I want to thank Gary Barta for the opportunity and the invitation to join the team last fall, and for his leadership and his mentorship during that time. Certainly what he's done for the Hawkeyes over his tenure, and really all of college athletics. Really thankful to President Wilson for the opportunity to lead over the coming months, and to do so alongside this great team here in athletics and across campus. Could not be more excited. This is going to be a really fun year for our student athletes and our teams. I know they're going to have great success both in the classroom and on the fields of competition. And as always, Hawkeye Nation is going to have a lot to cheer for with these teams. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, Scott Donovan with The Athletic. Hi, Beth. Welcome. Wanted to ask you about, there's a strategic plan in place currently through 2025. It happened before you arrived. Have you glanced at it? Do you have any thoughts about reshaping it, or are you going to kind of keep it as is until you into the future?
Yeah, great to see you, Scott. I have looked at it. Obviously, as a staff, we've been talking about that since my arrival. And one of the things I really like about it is it's a vision document, so it's really broad in nature. And so in the short term, we're going to continue to build out some goals that fit with that vision and align with the different pillars. And then long term, I think once there's a new permanent direction, my guess is there'll be a closer look at what that strategic plan might look like.
John Steppe, Cedar Rapids Gazette.
Hi, John.
Hi, Beth. A lot of things happening both at Iowa with gambling investigation, a lot of things happening at Big Ten level and nationally. What are your top priorities in your first month as interim AD?
Yeah, that's why you guys are having a busy summer, just like we are. There's no shortage of things to focus on. But, really for us, and I think this is always the case, regardless of what might be a hot issue of the day. I mean, first and foremost, your priority is always how do you best support the success of your student athletes and your teams. And that's where your focus lives day to day, and it's certainly influenced by some of the things you talked about, whether that's name, image, and likeness, or gambling, or conference realignment, all these things I'm sure we're going to get to talk about here. But that's really where we want to spend our time. There's plenty of short-term goals that I think over the next 6 months, both for me and our staff, that we want to continue to work through, from fundraising to making sure we manage our financial resources to being prepared strategically to navigate some of the changes in those external spaces. Just to name a few, we've got some great facility projects to both conclude, and some we're excited to start. So a handful of different topics that we'll continue to pay attention to. But there's always going to be new things that are going to attract our attention. But as long as we couch those in a way that the focus remains on providing a great experience and making sure we're building championship programs across all of our sports, that's where we're going to spend our time.
Hey, Beth. Tom Caper, Hawkeye Report. Wanted to ask you about the gambling investigation. And do you have any idea when the student athletes are going to find out what their suspensions might be? Where are you at in that process?
Yeah, on the reinstatement process specifically, we have submitted all the requested information to date to the NCAA. And we're optimistic that we are just hopefully days away, perhaps, from getting some feedback, at least initially, on what that means for our student athletes who currently are here and have remaining eligibility. There's obviously some additional steps in the process once that decision is rendered, but we're optimistic that that might happen here in short order as opposed to a few weeks down the road.
Hey Beth, Ted Lice, coach and winner registered. I kind of understand you've talked to Brad at the Swarm. Can you kind of characterize how those discussions went and then how to follow up as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I've had an opportunity to sit down with Brad. Really enjoyed it, that conversation. He sent me some notes about some tips on today too. One was to make sure I talked positively about the Swarm, so that would be no problem. But it's been wonderful to at least start to build a relationship with Brad. I know many of us on our staff had already had an opportunity to do that. But really, when it comes to name, image, and likeness, it's just a critical piece for our student athletes and our success competitively. No different than the generosity that's coming in through NIL gifts and through the Swarm and in other ways is just as important these days as scholarships and facilities and other operational needs. But really what Brad and his team have done, I think, has really given us a chance to be really successful. And the way that they did it, if you look across the country, many of the other collectives didn't quite have the same success right out of the gate. I think they've been very thoughtful. They're in his team is almost in daily conversation, sometimes with ours, and has been. But we're just really appreciative of his efforts, of all of those who've chosen to contribute there. And they're doing some exciting and fun things.
Yeah, and I know, one of his frustrations or their frustrations was, that there wasn't a lot of give and take with athletics. Do you feel empowered in your role as intermediate to kind of make some change in that area?
Yeah, I think from the beginning it's been a challenge, I think, for all campuses to try and find the right balance between what the NCAA rule structure is or lack of rules in this space might be and where we're comfortable operating. And so I know there's been conversations again with his team and going back to the beginning, but I think that the narrative around that, some of the movement that we're starting to see nationally, whether that be through some federal or state legislation or through potentially some more parameters from the NCAA, just gives us the ability to be a little bit more flexible. But I mean, my thought is that we want to be great partners with Brad, with the Swarm, and really with anyone that's willing to help and support our student athletes. So we're looking forward to seeing that continue for sure.
John Bonekamp, Associated Press. Good to see you. Getting back to the gambling, are you looking at this, or is there going to be kind of an expansion of the education for the student athletes on, and this, do you look at this as a cautionary tale for them to do more, to have more of an education thing?
I think any time, right, where you see something like this, it's always a time where you want to evaluate and see what practices you have in place and how you can get better. Gambling's a couple things. One, I do think we had educational components in place, but the world's changed, right? The environment that those young men and all of us and women are living in, being bombarded with advertisements and all of the online gaming opportunities, and the fact that it's now legal, certainly in the state of Iowa and across many states, the environment's changed. So how we educate, how frequently, what that mechanism is, I think is going to be really important. And as this, we come through this, we know and believe that the integrity of the game, there's just nothing more important than that. But we do think there's going to have to be an evaluation of how these rules are applied from an NCAA level. But absolutely going to want to try to continue to find ways to make sure student athletes understand the impact, the risks, the rules that are associated with sports gambling.
Going back to being days away from getting some feedback, what do you expect that feedback to entail? And then you were mentioning that there's some more steps after that. Does that mean that week one you may have answers on football players, or what's your level of optimism there?
We don't really have any indication of what the response will be. I mean, I think, all of you as well as we have seen what the prescribed penalties are. But part of the NCAA process is always to provide mitigation. So what are the other things that may have contributed to, any violation that occurred? So, I think we were, as cooperative and as transparent. Our athletes were as well in this process. And so we'll just, we're going to respond as best as we can to see what that might look like. And if there are additional steps that we need to follow, we'll do so.
I'll just ask him if it's a morning register. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
What has this last year been like for you? At this time last year, you were at Ball State, and so just what has it been like transitioning to Iowa and kind of now taking on this bigger role?
Well, every place I've worked has been incredibly special for a different reason. And so when I left Ball State, I wasn't running from a place that I didn't love. The people there were wonderful. I really enjoyed it. But this is Iowa, and it's the Big Ten, and the opportunity to come be a part of everything I knew about who the Hawkeyes were was just something that it just felt like I had to do. I wanted to be a part of this team. And so, I had a chance. I think my first day was September 30th, so really maybe mid-football season. And it was great. I mean, it's just such a welcoming environment, a great group of people, and it was a lot of fun just to begin to learn and understand what being a Hawkeye is all about. So I've enjoyed the last year. I've learned a lot. I still have a lot to learn, and we'll continue to lean on our great coaches and staff and community members to make sure we go down that path. But it's been a lot of fun, and I'm just grateful to be here.
Hi, Beth. I'm Hardy with Hawkeyes in KCDA Radio. Welcome here. I want to ask specifically about football, Brian's contract. Will that be handled the same way it was with Gary? You just kind of replacing the role that Gary played as far as him reporting to you?
That's correct. Yes, Brian does now report directly to me.
He does know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Beth, when you look at these, for instance, the event that's going to go on at Kinnick for women's basketball, is there, I think, looking at the tickets today, probably it's in the 40,000 range, it seems to be sold, maybe faster than that. Is this something that you anticipate trying to leverage in different unique ways to an event like this or other events involving sports that could have this type of environment?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things you look at. One, Iowa has a history of being innovative, so obviously you had the grapple and the gridiron. Ironically, I was here that day. I was with the wrong team, but came in for a football game that night. I think the creativity, you have both the creative side and the willingness to showcase your products, but it's really the enthusiasm that's built behind that. The entire thought process in terms of putting this game together, the crossover at Kinnick, was Coach Bluter. So, I mean, she came back. I'm not even sure we were 2 weeks removed from the Final Four, and she said, "Hey, I've got this idea." So clearly, we had to vet it. It took us a while to sort of work through that, but could not be more excited. I think we're at about 30,000. Tickets out right now, and the goal is we can work our way to a sellout. So, but it really speaks to not just the basketball piece, which we all know is incredible, but people want to be a part of what Coach Bluter and that team is about. They're just magnetic in their energy, and it's just a great way to raise the platform of women's basketball, and certainly for a great cause in supporting the hospital. But I do think it's important to evaluate those when you have a team that captures and inspires people around you. If there's a way that we can be creative and use that to continue to grow that, and certainly to help a great cause, I think those are things we should explore.
The conference has expanded, even under your watch at least. How quickly do you kind of have to pivot budget-wise and start looking ahead, because there's going to be more travel involved?
Yeah, I know it seems like it was fast, and certainly I think that was my first official day on the job. We're talking about adding new teams in the Big Ten, but I do think we were already headed down a similar road with the addition of USC and UCLA. This is my own opinion. We're going to see the proof as we finalize some schedules here in the coming months. But I really think it's materially not that much different. It'll add a little bit of help for those West schools, and I think the Big Ten and all of us are at this point really confident that perhaps we'll only have to travel one time out West. And the truth is many of our teams are doing that right now anyway, just in the non-conference schedule. And we may need to reevaluate that, but I think we can find a really good balance as to what those costs might be, to what the experience might be, and obviously making sure we put our students in an environment where they can be successful in the classroom, that they're getting the appropriate rest they need, and we're managing all the other things that come with being a high-level Division I athlete.
How did you get into this field, and just why is doing this important to you?
Well, I was a student athlete and really didn't think about pursuing a career. But I think as many of us that were in that role, you just realize what an impact that experience has on you. And there's really nothing I want more than our young men and young women to have the same experience that I did. The amount of confidence that it taught me, the way that it taught me that, hey, when something doesn't go your way, you're going to have to get back up and try it again to be with part of a team. It's just really exciting. So I started in coaching first, and really that was because my college coaches said, hey, you're going to go to grad school anyway, why don't you try it out? And I just never left. And so I truly believe, as simplistic as this might sound, that the opportunity to participate in sport is transformational. And I think it is an additive component of the educational experience that sets them apart long after their playing days are done. And I want more of our students to continue and have opportunities down that path, because I want our doctors and our lawyers and our politicians to be former athletes. I just think you learn something special when you have an opportunity to compete, whether that be in high school or Division III or Division I.
With having that interim tag, at least for now, is there anything that President Wilson has really emphasized that she wants to see you do, particularly maybe do differently in these 9 months while you're still interim?
From her directive to us is to continue to plow forward. So I think her expectation, as it is always, is that we want to have successful programs in all sense of the word, and we need to do and will continue to do what it takes to be the best we can, both competitively and in the way that we represent this institution and the state.
David Eichel, 24/7 Sports Bet. Good to see you again. Welcome back to Iowa.
Thank you.
How do you go about just prioritizing? You talk about all the short-term goals. How do you go about balancing what you want to accomplish and prioritizing what you want to accomplish? And how does your past experience help you do that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's an ongoing process, right? And it's not something you do individually. You do it with a team. And certainly we've got a great group of administrative team that is executing those, but it's really informed by what's important by our student athletes, our coaches, and how it aligns with the values and the priorities of the institution. And so as you're doing that, you're sort of saying, hey, what is the short-term need versus a long-term need, and what requires your time? And the truth is they all happen at once. It's kind of like asking, as I look out here at Coach Bluer, it's kind of like saying, hey, you working on offense today, or are you going to worry about what defense you're implementing? The truth is you're doing all of those things at one time. But I do think it's really important that you figure out what's an immediate focus, what's going to impact winning. And when I say impact winning, I mean winning in the classroom, winning on the fields of competition, and winning and helping to develop these young men and women as future leaders.
Beth, Elliott Club, Iowa.Rivals.com. Kirk had some praise for you the other day at Iowa's Football Media Day, just saying that you've done an excellent job thus far. What's your relationship with him like at this point?
Yeah, it's as you can imagine, and certainly somebody with his history and track record and the tradition and success that he's had, it's been a lot of fun to get to know him during my time here. So he was somebody I got to visit with on my interview, and certainly we spent a lot more time together, just really since the transition was announced, not just in the last couple weeks, but watching the way that he and his staff go about their business, getting a chance to be around the team has been really neat. And so if you look at the culture that's involved in that program and how they've continued to both evolve with the times, whether that's transfers or anything else, they continue to do things the right way, and his track record of success is the envy of many across the country.
Kirk and Fran have both said that they describe the transfer portal as being a mess. Just your thoughts on that? What do you think can be done to change that? What do you think needs to be done, if you think anything needs to be done?
It's a really great question, and there's a couple things that happened all at once that I think made it even more complicated. Right, it was rolled out in the middle of a pandemic, so now you had COVID years, and then also you launched name, image, and likeness, and so it's really hard, I think, as a coach to navigate all those things as once, as a student, as a parent, to try to figure out exactly what that looks like. But I think the pressure that the combination really of those three things have put on the transfer portal, and thus on our coaches, and most importantly on students making these decisions, has been really complex. And so, we're starting to see the end of those that had COVID years, and hopefully we'll have some consistency here at some point, some level of parameters around NIL, and maybe that'll help just a little bit. But it's changed the way they have to look at things, and there's a lot of positives. And I do think autonomy for students is important. There's many reasons why you want to transfer, and so it's not necessarily about limiting that, but how do we make it a little bit more practical for them, for coaches? I mean, these guys are recruiting now 365 days a year. and that's not good for anybody. But there's been some really positive things that I think have come out of it. It's just some tweaks around the edges on all of those topics, and I think we'll be in a better place.
You've worked alongside some of the greatest coaches in the sport, Hall of Famers, University of Iowa, as well as some of the other stops. But you've also been through some really trying experiences at other locations. Who and what has kind of shaped you to put yourself in the position that you are today? And what have you taken away from whether it's Gino Oriana, your situation at Minnesota? How has any of those situations shaped you into your mental outlook and your vision for getting this back?
The answer is all of them are a part of, I think, of who you become. And I have been so incredibly fortunate, as I am here at Iowa, to get to work with just people of character and high value and who are incredibly successful at what they do. And, whether that is Gino or Brad Stevens or Hugh McCutcheon at Minnesota, I've had some great examples about how really to be a true leader, how to be consistent, how to make sure you're leading in a way that puts others first. And that has been incredibly important. But I think to your question maybe about Minnesota and some of the trying times, I think that's really when you figure out who you are, how you can respond, how you're going to think through challenges and processes. And while none of us would wish that environment as a learning ground, I think when that happens, it gives you an opportunity really to see how you can thrive under pressure, what your process is for evaluating how you're going to keep people together and keep people united if you're navigating a little bit of an uphill stream. So I'm grateful for those times that have been challenging, because I think they prepare you for what's next and help you feel more confident in navigating any situation that comes in front of you.
And this place has been through some trying times in the last decade. Are you comfortable with the image of this department right now? Judging from your opening statements, you are, but do you think it's where it needs to be right now, given everything that's happened?
I don't think we ever want to say we're where we need to be. I know no one on our staff, whether you're talking about competitive success or the best version of who we are, I hope we're always a work in progress. Certainly we, just like any other institutions, have had trying moments. I think it's important that, although I wasn't here for those, that I understand what those issues are, what those issues were like then, and try to ensure and help support us in not making any repetitive mistakes. But it's always going to be a work in progress. I am incredibly proud of what I see here, the people that I see here, and the belief that we are really trying to serve people the right way, to serve our institution the right way, and to support our student athletes and everybody else in a manner that's going to be respectful and inclusive for everybody. But it doesn't mean we're not going to have places where we can grow and get better. And the goal is to create that positive environment. If we see something that's not going well, we're going to address it. We're going to insert accountability. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to move forward.
I've heard from a lot of your past colleagues, coaches, who really appreciate your coaching background. How does that help you as an administrator when you've been in their shoes before?
Yeah, I certainly wish I could say I'd been in the shoes of some of our folks here, whether that's Elisa Salucci or Tom Brands and some of the successes they had. But it does. I think for me, it helps give me a little bit of perspective of what it was like in their shoes. I'm certainly still jealous. I miss coaching every day. Writing the lineups on the back of a napkin and trying to figure out what comes next. I just loved practice. It was the best time of the day. But I also understand what it's like when you've got a student athlete you've really been working with, and maybe something doesn't go exactly the way you want. When you get that phone call from the recruit you've been chasing for a long time that says, "Hey, I've made a different decision." And so I think it allows me to be empathetic and at least have a perspective, even though times have changed since I've been coaching. That hopefully is helpful when they have challenges or opportunities they want to discuss.
In what areas would you say your management style might be similar to Gary's, and what ways might it be different?
Did you say leadership style? Is that
Management style.
management style?
As Gary's, and how might it be different? How can Fancy manage things differently?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer about yourself, and so it might be a good question for some of the folks I get to work with. But I think with all of us, and even though this component will be different, we all have to lead and manage in a way that's really authentic to ourselves. And so, you've got to figure out how to do that in a way that you can build, I think a trusting, respectful, personal and professional relationship, with everyone around you. Certainly that's what I had with Gary. But, I think at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about really listening. It's about understanding who we are at Iowa. It's not about who's the best in some other league or the best in the Big Ten. It's about how do we be the best version of being a Hawk and in each sport. And I think as you do that understand that as a leader, understand what it means to each program, then you can support and help lead in that way.
One of the things that stands out about this athletic department is the coaching stability. You see Lisa back there, Kurt and Fran. What does that mean to you, and what does it mean to this athletic department to have that kind of stability that you know?
There's really no words that do that justice. No one, I mean no one in the country can take a look across the department and say, hey, we have that experience, the success, the tradition, the type of people that Iowa has. I mean, so there's just no way really to measure that except for to recognize each day how fortunate we are to have these Hall of Fame coaches that are running around our halls each and every day. And the legacy they've created, the legacy they're going to leave for many decades to come, it's really neat and really special. I mean, you have just the most experienced staffs across the board in many of our sports, and they've accomplished a lot, and it's comforting to walk in a building every day when you have people that have done it for so long and done it so well.
There's no secret that there's been the most transformative change in the NCAA, the relationship with student athletes in the last 5 years, let alone 10, in history of the amateur athletics. The next front potentially could be student athlete pay by the universities themselves. Where do you stand on that? What do you see as the likely scenario in the future?
Well, I wish I knew the exact answer to that question, Scott, about how those scenarios play out, because there's a lot of different, a lot of different ways that decision may come to be, whether that's through federal legislation or through some of the litigation that's out there. I think college athletics needs to evolve. And what that means for how we share resources with student athletes, and what the actual pathway is for that to happen remains to be seen. But I also believe, and I don't think these two things are mutually exclusive, I think we can provide greater resource, greater revenue opportunities, whether that's within or outside the athletic department, and still embed this experience with the components that make it, that tie it to education, and make it different than pro sports. Student athletes not being paid is not the only thing distinctive about college athletics, and between that and pro sports. So I think it's incumbent upon us, that those of us that get to work and manage and lead in that space, to make sure they're getting an education, that we're preparing them for what's next. I mean, in the Big Ten and here at Iowa, as you know, we have a lifetime commitment to helping them earn that degree, and not to mention the life skills and other things that go around it. So it's going to be an interesting path. Hard to predict if that's going to be in 5 months or 5 years or another 10 years, but things are going to continue to change. And I think college athletics will continue to be, they may look different, they may feel different, but I think the experience for the students involved can still be equally as rewarding and impactful to them individually, and to our fan bases as well.
You mentioned that when this opportunity came up, it felt like it was one that you had to be a part of. I guess, what did you know about Iowa before that made you feel that way?
Well, I know I came here a good handful of times and usually left on the losing end of the scoreboard. But I obviously spending some time in the Big Ten, and I'm a Midwest kid. I mean, 3.5 hours is as close as I've lived to home in a long time, so certainly familiar with the long history here, the history in women's athletics. And I've been following wrestling here for a long time. I mean, so you knew a lot around the edges, and just the reputation that Iowa has, both in the Big Ten and across the country. And so all those things were appealing, and talk about rewarding to know all that and show up and then say, hey, it's even better than what I expected. So it's again, I just feel really grateful to be a part of the Hawkeye team.
When you look at the tradition and history of Iowa athletics, especially when it comes to women's athletics, Christine Grant stands tall among anybody nationally. I mean, what did you know about her before you came here? What have you learned about her since you
Yeah, how special to have someone like that paved a path that not only impacted people locally, but across the country. I had a chance to meet her once, and as a young administrator, you go to conferences across the country, and she was a big draw. And so I still remember the first time you had a chance to listen to her speak and engage with her briefly, never knowing I'd actually have a chance to walk around among the places that she had a part in developing. So I think it's just, it's an incredible lesson even now to our younger athletes who are feel so far removed from that time, about the advocacy and that it takes sometimes to develop opportunities for sports and for young women, and really across many areas of life. So it's a privilege to be at the place that she started that legacy, and we certainly hope we continue to honor that as well as they have been going forward.
Speaking so much of women's athletics, obviously one of the biggest names in women's athletics at the college level is Caitlin Clark. How much does she get a part of this process for you? Have you talked with her quite a bit? Where is that right now?
Yeah, again, you're talking about, we've had a couple here in different sports at Iowa, but you've got just a generational player and a generational young woman. Take basketball aside. In the short time I've been around, and obviously got to travel with these guys for 3 to 4 weeks when they were making their run, and so even closer look with the program and getting to be around Caitlin and her teammates. But what she represents, what she's chosen to represent outside of just the skills she has on the court, and it's not just Caitlin, it's her teammates as well, but they have chosen to be great representatives of Iowa. They choose every day to be mentors. They recognize that's important to them. And you're just so fortunate to have someone like that who took that stage, took the opportunity, is using it for so much positive across the stage. But I'd been on the women's basketball committee, so I'd watched a lot of Iowa women's basketball, and so like the rest of just like sports fans in any sport you watch, was a huge fan of just her game before I arrived. So just like anyone else, you finally get to be in the gym and watch what she does. It's pretty special.
Take 2 more questions.
A big part of AD's legacies go down to head coaching hires. If and when that time comes, or you have a high profile name, what's your philosophy in terms of those searches, and what qualities are you looking for?
Well, short of not letting these guys retire anytime soon. But, again, Iowa is really fortunate because, again, those coaches have created this great tradition that's going to make these opportunities just so appealing for them, for others when they become open. But, primarily, I was actually just talking with somebody the other day about this exact same thing. And I think the most important thing is to figure out what type of individual you need for your institution. I personally don't believe that every coach can be equally successful at each place. I think it depends on who you are, what you want to be, what your culture is, and finding the right coach that fits all of those needs. So I think it's really important that you sort of define, hey, here are our top 5 priorities in this sport for the person that's going to lead the program going forward, and then you start the search process from there to make sure that you are looking at candidates that are going to hit all those marks.
Kind of clarifying something that was asked earlier about Brian Ferentz, is the contract provision still in place, the 25 points per game?
It is.
Is that still in?
Mm-hmm.
So following up off that, if he doesn't hit 25 points per game, are you planning on following that, or?
Well, let me lead with this. His goal, and I know because I've sat down with him, I sat down with Kirk, and really the goal of every coach that we have here is to win games, right? And I'm 100% convinced, I was going into those conversations, I was going out, that their focus is on how do we win football games and how do we develop these young men. And so, as we look at those types of things, just like we would in any sport, you're going to evaluate a season at the end and see how you did. But the goal is to win along the way. I've won some ugly games as a coach, and I never gave any of them back. But I'm confident. I know they're excited. I know you all have now had a chance to see that team. We're excited about what they're going to do in the field, and we understand it's unique. We understand it's going to be talked about a lot, but it's just not something we're going to be thinking about week in and week out. We're going to cheer for the team, support the program, support our coaches the way we always do, and we'll evaluate at the end of the season.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.